everybody.
Let me make sure these guys are.
Yeah, all right.
Are you recording? They're starting. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. This is June 16th meeting of the Budget and Audit Committee for the City of Jackson. The first thing we have is the approval of the minutes. I don't see those in our packet, but she did mail those out earlier. Are there any additions or corrections to those? If I don't hear any, we'll go ahead and have those as approved. Moving on to item 3, information. Bobby, can you kind of give us an update on our revenues for
Sure.
the last month?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. Very quickly, we've reported throughout the year on hotel tax, sales tax compared to budget, and we've exceeded the budget the entire year. That was true again in May. We're gonna end up the year with both of those revenue accounts well above what we budgeted. I thought what I would do this morning is just report on sales tax compared month, the total collections each month compared to the prior year. That's a little different than the financial statements, because the financial statements and the budgets have beginning and ending accrual, so the numbers will be just a little bit different. But we reported last month that April was the first month where the checks were actually, the revenue was actually below April from the prior year. I didn't know what to make of that. It turns out that our payment in May turned out to be the biggest variance compared to the prior year that we've had all year. So sales tax, it's just unbelievable what happened in May. I don't know if there's some reporting issue or what, but I'm not aware of any. But sales tax collections were 33% in the month of May, higher than May of the prior year. I'll look back to 2018-19, and our sales tax collections those years, all of those years, were somewhere around $1,750,000, something like that, year after year. The total in May of this year was $2.3 million. So year to date now, we're 8.9%. This is local sales tax. 8.9% higher than the prior year. On the hotel tax, I got a report from Lori. I don't know if she's
I don't see
okay.
her
I don't
here.
know if she's here or not. I probably won't adequately represent this. It's good news, though. You know, hotel tax has been much stronger all year than we had projected for it to be. They account for things a little bit different, more on the calendar year, and sometimes her numbers, she adjusts them for the 2-month lag time in reporting, so it can be a little, she could explain it better than I. However, I'm pretty confident in telling you from her email, I think they're estimating 2021 calendar, well, this is year to date actually, calendar year at 707,000. You could compare that to the 2020, which had a significant impact, obviously, with COVID, was 500,000, and actually 2019 was 622,000. So they've bounced back in terms of historically where they've been, and it's rebounded very strongly.
So over year to date, 2019 for this fiscal year, we've exceeded 2019.
That's correct, yeah.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, by, about $80,000.
Okay.
Well, the sales tax figures for 2020 were up from 2019 anyway.
That's right,
Mhm.
yeah. So that would conclude my report on revenue.
Any
unless there's
questions on that? You know, that was one of the things that we set out, and I think it may be good for us to continue to just kind of monitor those categories as we go into the next fiscal year too.
Yeah, well, I would just, since we're all together, so, back when we saw the decrease in April from April of the prior year, right, and was right in the middle of the budget process, and we were trying to estimate this year and so forth. So, what I did was, I went back and adjusted my estimates for May and June of this year. Basically what I did is I went back and had those numbers kind of be reflective of what May and June collections actually were last year. And then so what's in next year's budget is a combination of that increase in collections that we've had over the course of this year, adjusted a little bit for what I expected to be in May and June. And so it's kind of budgeted flat. So we'll just have to see I guess you can look at it one or two ways. Will we be able to maintain this level of collections in the next fiscal year? I think that's a question. And, will the number possibly, at least in the early part of this next year, as things bounce back, the numbers may be much stronger than what I budgeted for, who knows? So
Yeah.
we'll just have to see.
I think that's kind of the game that we had to play last year as we entered into these revenue projections. And so, we took the conservative approach on these final 2 months to budget them flat. But as we're seeing, they're exceeding expectations already. Just some update on information. I'll let the mayor provide some as well on the American Rescue Plan. He and I attended a kind of a seminar, for lack of a better term, put on by the comptroller's office to kind of walk us through and really to warn us about the ways that we would spend these dollars. And just what I came away with was put your plans together, but wait on spending. That's kind of the gist of what I got. Right now, I think we're still in that review period. So they've given us, and I've passed that out to everybody, we talked about it a little bit last month, they gave us some initial guidance, but it was, that's what it was initial guidance. It's not the final guidance. So when they, and I wasn't aware of this when that was issued, but they've given a 120-day period for municipalities and others to make comments on that guidance, and then they'll issue the final guidance, and then that's what we'll be bound to spend the dollars. And so we've had some discussions about, doing some calculations on lost revenue, doing some projections on how we could use that to improve our infrastructure, which was a big preaching point by the comptroller's office and our representatives at the state level, is that the state really wants to see investments in infrastructure. But they're also pushing some infrastructure opportunities from the state level. And, we're hearing buzz about infrastructure opportunities from the federal level. So all that combined could have a positive outlook for the infrastructure here in Jackson. But we're gonna continue to wait and plan for when we get the final guidance for that, and be able to pivot and make some good decisions. And the reason they say that is if you spend the money and it does not align with the guidance, then they come looking for it at the end of the program. We don't wanna be stuck in that position. Any questions on the American Rescue Plan? Or do you have anything to add?
No, I think we're about 50 days away from the final guidance. We have interim final guidance right now. Only federal government does interim final guidance. And so from everything I've heard, I think from the CARES Act, it was kind of a revolving, changed as they saw the need, but I think they're gonna try to make the changes at the final is the way it sounds. But from everything I've heard, that as election year approaches, that congressional districts and Senate races, they want to lax the guidance, so they're getting money infused in their districts for reelection, and so people are happy with them. So I think they're going to try to loosen up those guidelines and restrictions to what they can be used for. But we've got our drawdown for this year already, and so we're holding on to that, and then looking at creating some plans on how we can utilize that.
One of the other things that they talked about doing was setting up a kind of an example database on if Jackson was to spend it in one way, and what we'll do is confirm that with the comptroller's office. They have a team
prior
set
to
up.
spending.
Yeah, prior to spending. So hey, we have Project X. We want to make sure this meets all the guidelines. Are we approved on this? They'll then take Project X and put it in a database for other communities to see, hey, here's how Jackson spent it, or we can look and say, okay, here's how this community spent the dollars. And that way it will make it a whole lot easier to process through. Any questions on that? If not, we'll move into business. FY22 budget amendment review. We've got 2 budget amendments that are coming before the city council. The mayor had talked about having this committee just review and talk through that. I've invited the department heads from each of these departments that these will impact. Bobby, can you give us just an overview of these budget amendments, and then we'll have each department head kind of come up and tell us how how they
Sure.
plan to use it.
So very quickly, the form you have is just kind of the internal form that we use for the budget amendment. There's nothing magical about that, but, the first one has to do with the solid waste, fund, solid waste department, health and sanitation department, that's, goes by different name.
Yeah.
Okay. So this budget amendment basically would, fund, would amend the budget to include 4 additional positions in the solid waste department. I believe I'm correct in saying all 4 of these positions are the same position title, operator 2 or something. And but essentially what the 4 positions would be used for, 2 of the positions would be used with the expansion of our claw truck services under the new contract. And then the other 2 positions would be used to service trash collection in the downtown area where there are community or courtesy trash deposit cans that need to be emptied and serviced on a regular basis. And then the other 2 would be used to service similar responsibilities in the city parks. So is that accurate? Okay. And the total cost of that with benefits, as best we can estimate for this budget year anyway, would be $229,116.
And so is that a reduction? I know that some of these positions were included, like we had groundskeeping, so
That
there's not a
will be
reduction in
a
groundskeeping budget. So we're gonna see those budget dollars will be assigned to like improvement of the groundskeeping.
Yeah, so those 2 groundskeeping members will stay in groundskeeping, and we're working through, presenting a budget amendment to this group in council in the next month or so on additional groundskeeping staff.
Okay,
To maintain our parks, and we've kind of redesigned how they're gonna focus. And so, those 2 people right now, we have a garbage truck that goes to all the parks, goes downtown. It just makes more sense to have the garbage truck into our solid waste fund and health and sanitation instead of groundskeeping. So we're gonna move that over. They've already got in their capital budget to purchase a new garbage truck, cause that garbage truck that we have now leaks. And so they have that, they'll purchase a new truck, and then some of our groundskeeping guys that are on the truck will work with their department on training the guys on the routes and where the cans are and everything like that. But we'll keep those 2 groundskeeping guys in our groundskeeping department to focus on, beautification. Yeah, we have 2 groundskeepers now doing it. Those 2 groundskeepers will stay in groundskeeping, and the 4 positions that we're gonna hire in health and sanitation, 2 of those will be on that garbage truck.
Leilani, on the claw trucks, so these 2 claw truck operators we have them coming on to replace what was formerly taken care of by Waste Management? Okay, okay. And so are these, I guess, since we opened this up, will we be looking for experienced claw truck operators, or will we be training these guys up?
We will be training.
Okay,
Trying to find CDL drivers right now
yeah,
with experience on knuckle booms is almost impossible. So more than likely we will be training. Yes.
okay,
So the sooner we can get them in, the better.
okay.
Right now, our guys are running 6 days a week, 12 hours Monday through Friday,
10 hours.
10 hours, yeah.
Yeah. Saturdays, we don't work full day because the landfill closes at noon.
Yeah, they're busting it. Any questions on this budget amendment? Operations, it's been something that we've had a lot of discussion. Leilani and myself and some others have been meeting on trash collection and bulky waste collection for the last number of months. And we've identified the expansion of the claw trucks in particular, as a definite need. So it's good to see that service expanding. But that is something that we're gonna have to continue to revisit as we move forward.
And yeah, to that point, once we get the 4 hired, get them trained on the garbage truck and the claw trucks, then we'll reevaluate. Cause we have 2 knuckle booms in the capital budget. After we get that done, we'll reevaluate any need for additional trucks. Cause Monday, we have 4 down on Monday, yeah.
4 in the garage waiting. So our average right now is 30 calls per operator a day. So
Any questions on this that, or insight that we need to provide the council? Are you looking for a recommendation on this, or what are you looking for?
I just want to go.
Go review?
Yeah, just review.
Okay. With that,
Are we held to
Speaking
any
to the microphone.
timing?
Senator.
So this is going into next fiscal year's budget, right?
Right.
We've already approved that at the council level. And this is just, would be a regular amendment like we
Yeah, so
normally
it
would
would
be.
be
But do we have?
finalized in August. And
Okay,
by
so
the-
it won't happen until then, is that?
Well, the time it takes for us to post it, get
Yeah.
hires, get background checks, get someone hired, you know,
Okay.
it'll be August.
It'll be August. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I was curious about.
yeah, that's a good question. So how does that process work? So we go, we
So I guess I'm
approve the
asking,
initial
are we
amendment.
amending the budget that hadn't been
We are,
approved yet by
do-
the comptroller?
we are, well, yes.
Okay.
I mean, I will tell you, you know, the budget, if you go back and read the ordinance, you know, it's very clear. These appropriations are not effective until July 1, right? So I'm in daily communication with the comptroller's office right now on the approval, which I don't anticipate any problems whatsoever. But yes, this amendment would increase, the budget, right? So we're changing, so it'd be 2 readings.
Mhm.
So there'll be one in July and a second reading in August. And this will be the first amendment to the FY '22 budget. Right. Does that help? Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So I guess the question here too, one final question on this. Revenue funds will be derived from general fund balance.
Right.
So that, these funds aren't coming out of,
No, it's the solid waste fund balance, but it's the solid
Yeah.
waste general fund.
yeah, the solid waste fund balance.
That's correct.
Okay. Just for clarification purposes.
Yeah.
Moving on to the second amendment there you have. Bobby, can you run us through
Yeah,
that?
very quickly. So, this, second proposed budget amendment would address funding, again, in FY '22 for the street, repaving program. Currently in the budget that, was approved by council that would be effective July 1, there's $1,902,158 in the street repaving program. Just as a refresher for everybody, that's made up of 2 different numbers, right? So the FY '21 year that we're in right now, we got a grant from the state for 1.5 million, if I remember them as round numbers.
Yeah.
We had to use some of that money for, some resurfacing, needs out on Ridgecrest Road. But we have, $1,244,658 of that grant that has been carried over into, this new year. We have been, approved and expect to see, to receive a $750,000 grant in, the FY '22 year. The plan is to use, about 90, let's see, I'm trying to find my number here. The plan is to use part of that grant for, a traffic signalization project that can be talked about if we need to discuss that, but that leaves $657,500 for street repaving. So the amount of $1,902,158 for next year is comprised of those 2 numbers, right?
Okay.
And so the proposed budget amendment is to transfer $4 million from, our general fund, fund balance. As you know, we anticipate a successful year, financially. We had, estimated, and I would caution everybody, this is still an estimate, it was done a few months ago, you know, a surplus this year of $8.5 million. I think we are on track, as far as I know, you know, for that. But this budget amendment would transfer from that general fund balance, $4 million over to the capital outlay fund as revenue for this next year. And then we would increase our paving budget by $4 million. So that's what would happen.
The, one comment or question, the only significant impact I could see to the surplus for our present year is the JTA drawdown that I see potentially happening. And I don't know where they're at as far, I know they've sent us a request. So that,
We're going through that, talking about that, because the timelines are very,
they're into next year.
some are into the following year, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it may be that those appropriations come out of this future budget, which we've already budgeted for.
Yeah.
And the current year stays within the general fund.
yeah.
Okay,
I would say that's certainly one of the more material potential.
yeah.
There there are
Other less material, right.
less material problems.
Okay. I've invited Mr. Wolf to come and kind of share. So this is a significant package, significant dollars. You know, reading the newspaper earlier this week about, you know, the number of streets. So could you run us through, and I'll be happy to kind of move that up to the podium there. If you could run us through kind of the plan at present.
I'm wearing a brace for sympathy, see if it works. Because I can't use it when I work with my computer. Based on what I understand, when I came on board, we had 1.5 million to do a paving for 2021. I believe I was before budget probably 2 months ago, and we talked about the paving program in anticipation of another 1.5 million coming across, but evidently either at the state level or wherever level that money's coming from, there was talk of either possibly none or 750. So based on that, and the fact that we had to do some emergency repairs on Ridgecrest as a result of the I-40 work, when the storms were hitting, what happened was that the traffic was so bad, they had it down to 1 lane, 5-mile backups on there, and the truckers, the state did not direct anybody off the interstate. They did it upon themselves, and they were using Ridgecrest, or I keep getting mixed, whatever street it is, they were using that, and we suffered significant damage to that roadway, and we had to do it as an emergency. We shut it down on a Friday night when we found about all the problems. That cost was about $252,000, I believe. That was subtracted from the 1.506 or whatever it was. So as the Alderman indicated, or council member indicated, with the 750 minus some traffic signal, we're looking about 1.92 million. I was advised that there was another 4 million that was going to be added, and I've discussed this with the mayor, and I've discussed it with our people in engineering as well. My goal is not to take and spend $6 million at one crack. In my previous practice, when I've been working with paving, I've always wanted to do a fall schedule and a spring schedule. What I typically do is use less than 0.5% of the money available and keep the other half, because you never know what's going to happen over the course of a winter. A good example is what happened to the roads here in our town. So my goal would be to spend approximately 4 million and carry 2 million into the fall or into the spring. Once we get this project done, or get this project started in fall, I want to work over the winter with my staff and develop a program for spring, bid it somewhere in the February, March range, so that when the batch plants all open up for service, we can get going right away. By doing this, I think we get an economy of scale. We'll get cheaper prices to do the work, and it will work. I personally think it'll work very well. We've developed a preliminary list. There's approximately 80 streets, if I counted them right, 80 streets and talking Al, I think we're at 3.77 million for those 80 streets. The mayor has indicated, and I think there's an email that, I think, Mayor, did they all get the email as well? That you put out for the paving, or for the equipment and stuff, or is that just coming to me?
kind of internal discussion.
Okay. Do you want me to discuss that or not?
Now, we're gonna look at we had to look at some other numbers on what the.
Okay. But that's what we plan on doing right now. In anticipation of getting this out to bid, I'm not sure with the workload that's happening right now if all $3.7 million of work can be completed this year. But I talked to Bobby briefly this morning about it. If it's under contract and come spring, we can put a pause in the paving contract and move it into the spring to finish up the work. It's all going to depend upon when the asphalt plant shut down for the winter. Typically, it's around November. They shut down for 6 weeks of maintenance. The if there, or the but there, is that if the state of Tennessee Department of Transportation has projects going, they're under deadlines, and if the weather permits, they keep a batch plant open somewhere in order to do that. If we have the benefit of being able to pull asphalt from that open plant, we should be able to work a little bit longer. There is one stipulation in the state specifications that I have to make sure that we follow, is that the state dictates in their specifications when you can do specific asphalt work. Like our paving program is 1.5 inches of surface. That program, typically in their specs, say you shut down somewhere in the middle of November and you're shut down till the middle of March. There is a clause in their specifications that if the contractor and the weather permits, you can file what is called a Cool Pave 3.0 report that the state specs allow, where they come through and say, okay, and they give us a diagram, they take into account asphalt temperatures, air temperatures, how many rollers they need, et cetera, and they develop a program, and it's developed on a daily basis. How many rollers they need, when they start rolling, when they stop rolling, what the temperature of it has to be. They can pave at any time at all with that approved Cool Pave report. And because it's surface, they have a different program, different guidelines, I think, for anything over 1.5 inches. It's, you can pave up through the middle of December, and you can start in the middle of March versus the middle of April. But since the surfacing we do is all 1.5 inches, we can work as long as the plants are open and all the conditions are met of the state specifications. So obviously, we're gonna take advantage of that. I think with the $4 million program or $3.7 million program, we should get some pretty decent pricing because of the quantities we're dealing with. And there's a lot of streets out there that need work. And that's the reason for the program. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them.
So from, just trying to track with you, so fall, we're looking at spending, right now, you've got an estimate $3.9 million to put out to bid, that includes 80 streets. You wanna-
Yes.
You want to
Yes, sir.
hold 2 million as kind of an emergency fund
Yes, sir.
to be able to fund any repairs that are needed coming out of the winter. And you anticipate possibly that original $4 million at 80 streets would roll over into the spring as well, potentially.
If it's not completed,
If
correct.
it's not completed.
Correct.
So, just trying to back into some timeframes. So we have this budget amendment in July. We finalize it in August. I guess are we slated to have a contract prepared by that August meeting?
That is my goal right now. We have the listing, we gotta make sure we have all the quantities and specs. That is my goal right now. Because I believe when, I've got some mixed understandings. When does that, I know it goes to city council for
Right.
approval. And if we wanna do it August 1st, it's gotta be submitted, it's gotta be bid out probably within the next 3 weeks in order to hit that schedule. So if with an okay on this, but again, this program is based on that $4 million as well, because that's what we're working with. So I'm not sure if you want me to move forward with the 4, not knowing because the amendment hasn't been passed yet. We can put it out at 4 and be ready in August.
Right.
August. And my question is this, can we also, because of the additional streets that have been added, and it's been a significant quantity added, to put everything together, would the city council be amenable to a special call if we need an extra week or so to get this because of the size of the contract? I'd really like to get started sometime in August with the paving.
Yeah. Well, that's where I'm kind of backing into this. So it looks like you have, if everything's approved by August, you have August, September, October, and part of November.
I would say probably a good chunk of November. yes.
Right. Usually it's around Thanksgiving that we
Correct.
see them shut down.
Correct.
So then we come out, then we come out of the winter. We've got April, May, and June. Maybe a portion of March, depending on temperatures.
Correct.
So, I see 6 to 7 months of plausible paving windows, not including the winter.
The 2 million, correct.
Right. And so, as I think about that, like mobilization of the, if we're putting this out to bid to, you know, to a large, paver, and I'm familiar with those groups, do they have the capacity to do 80 streets in 7 months?
I would, personally speaking, with my experience with a qualified paving contractor, which I believe the ones that would bid this will have to be in that category, qualified, yes, I think in 7 months they can do that work. If
Okay.
they have to bring in extra crews, fine. The only problem is gonna be is if the winter months are really bad, we can't do anything in November, December, January, February. And I think you took those out of the equation.
That's right, yeah.
And if we get some decent weather in November, December, January, and we can tackle some of that work, because they're gonna wanna keep their guys working and keep them off of unemployment or whatever they do with their employees, it would be an advantage for them to get some of that work done at that point in time.
So when we bid this out, are we asking them to consider to pave in those winter months as well? And I guess they're gonna have to look at, you know, trucking asphalt from Parsons or wherever
Correct.
the potential plan is. And does that increase the cost of the paving bid?
If there's longer haul routes, typically, I would say yes, it may impact it, but I think because of the quantities, and if the state's got the plant open anyways, I think, it may have an impact, it just depends upon all the circumstances.
Okay. My concern is, you know, and as I've shared it with this committee before, you know, I see this budget as a contract with the community. And so if we say we're gonna do something, I wanna make sure that we're setting a bar that we can jump over. I don't wanna say, hey, we can pave 80 streets and we can only get 40 or 50 done, and then we're rolling over into the next year. You know, I know there are certain instances where you have, you know, if we factor into those 7 months, you know, we got 20 working days, you know, out of each month potentially, and then you've got rain days as well. The window gets real tight.
Correct.
And so when I'm looking at this, I just want to make sure that if we're allocating these dollars, that they could get spent in this fiscal year. And I just, you know, I need to hear that confidence that that can happen.
Okay. What I can do with that regard, I can share with the paving contractors and give them the list and say, hey, here's what program we're looking at. In your realistic mind, can you get this work done by, and give them a drop dead date of June 30, just so, because
Right,
that's when the
exactly.
the
Yeah.
fiscal year's in. Can you do it or can you not? If they tell me they can't, I may want to consider dropping that schedule back, because I don't want to say we're going to do it and then not do it.
That's right.
I want to work I want to work some more time yet, and and I know the roads need the work, and I don't
Yeah,
want
there's
to, I don't
no
want to
doubt.
promise something that we can't commit.
That's right. You know, I like setting bars that you can jump over.
Yes.
And so that's kind of where I'm at on this. And I'm well, open it up to the rest of the committee to kind of ask some questions. But, you know, when we say we're going to do something, I want to make sure that we can achieve that goal.
And that's my goal.
Okay.
And I think the conversation with the paving contractors, even if it's just one of them, I think the two biggest ones, I don't remember their names, but there's two fairly big ones, and they're
Yeah.
doing a lot of interstate work. They should be able to give me a very realistic deadline as whether they can or cannot, because they know their business better than I know their business. So
Sure.
I'm comfortable talking to them and saying, hey, here's our program, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that information as we go into the city council consideration of this would be advantageous to have.
I can do.
When would the list be going out to the council?
We can give it to you, I can provide it at this point in time. It's pretty much set in stone unless something changes, but yeah, we've got the list, it is available.
That's provided that the contractors say they can do it all, and it's a preliminary list, provided all things remain constant and equal.
Right. So give me this opportunity, I will get a hold of a contractor, see if I can't set up a meeting with them, go over that list, and then if they say, yes, it's a go, then I can share that information, rather than send it out now and have him say, well, no, we can't get 80, we can only get 60, and then have to come back with the secondary list. I don't want to do that.
Okay. Questions from the committee?
Just had one question. Yeah, the only question I was thinking here, if I'm tracking with you, we're doing the $4 million big project. We already have the 1.9 that's in there. That's, as you mentioned, rolling over as kind of the spring
this year's grant and the 750 anticipated July 1.
Okay, and all the money's going in the same bucket, right? So it's there. Are there any implications one way or the other by,
Okay.
if we're only using roughly 4 million before next calendar year? Are there any implications one way or the other of when we approve the amendment?
Yeah, well,
Like if it, worst case scenario, yeah, do we have to have it all in there right now?
We have to have enough to cover whatever that contract would be by August.
Okay,
There has to be a funding source for the expenditure. So if we only have 1.9 in there now and we do a contract of 2.5, we gotta
Yeah.
have 2.5 funding source.
okay. Or I
No.
guess, and does it matter if we go ahead and put the full 4 million in there? Okay, so like at the end of the year, hope this doesn't happen.
We
but-
would need to put the 4 million in there before we had a contract, because the contract will be over 1.9 million.
Okay,
Yeah.
or I guess, do we only put as much that's needed for that contract? Like I guess worst case scenario, if the work doesn't happen like we hope it does, and that money's in there already allocated, do we just do a budget amendment and roll it to the next year? Okay, there's no implication that it's sitting there, okay,
Well, that's kind of what's happened the last two
Last
fiscal
year,
years,
yeah.
right? I mean, I think we had 3.7 million allocated the first year that we were here, towards street resurfacing. Oh, yeah, so that's kind of the condition that we were in the last 2 years. I think we had 3.7 the first year. We spent, Bobby, I think 2 million of that, around
yeah,
that.
right.
Then last year, we had, because it was a bare bones, we had the 1.5 grant, we spent 250 of that. So these dollars have been rolling. And that's where, at this point, and, you know, we'll come to those discussions about these infrastructure planning committees. I think that's where it's important to make sure, hey, we've got people and we've got a plan together to make sure that whatever we're saying we're gonna do, we're gonna make our best effort to make sure that it gets done. And that we don't have, you know, half of, or 75% of what we said we were gonna do roll on to the next year.
Just a couple of points of, technical points of maybe of clarification. I hate to get in the weeds too much, but it's a little bit, different than it might normally be, in that some of the funds that we're talking about now are state grant funds. And if I remember right, the completion date on the 1.5 million that we received the year we're in now, that there's 1,244,000 carrying over into next year's budget. You may remember it's 23, it goes beyond the FY 22 fiscal year, right? And, the grant for this current year, which would include, for paving anyway, $657,500. I would anticipate that it would be the same way. So those
I
funds.
think it has to be used or committed by the end of FY 22, the 750 does.
It does?
I think so,
Okay.
yeah.
It may be. So normally, if you're not talking about these state grant funds, for something to be encumbered or carried over from one budget year to the next, it has to be contracted, right? So it gets a little technical into which pot of funds we're talking about.
What dollars you
That's
spend
right,
first,
yeah.
right,
Okay.
to satisfy the grant requirement.
need to spend those first to make sure you don't.
So that
We don't have
1.9 that
money
we've got, that, we need to spend those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of that within this fiscal year,
Yeah.
is what you're saying.
Yeah, we gotta have the
And some of it by-
750 committed by June 30
Right,
of of 22.
okay. So at least half of this needs to be spent or committed, contracted by the end of this year. Okay.
Sure.
Hot potato.
Yes, my question was more, I guess, from a general budgetary standpoint and timeline. So from what I remember in our previous conversations, when we're looking at the 5-year budget and what our projections are each year, it seems to me that with this amendment, it's really not coming out of nowhere. It all boils back to, we're expecting a large surplus this year that's gonna help us speed up projects that we're gonna be over the next 2 to 3 years. And we were even having to rank streets from A
Well,
to D
the
or 1
projects
to
that we
4.
didn't get to do last year,
Right.
so that we,
So are we making sure that we're, with the you know, 80 streets we're talking about, are we addressing the Ds, Cs?
Yeah,
I can't remember. if
Those,
there's one
those are
through four,
priority
so
one and
there-
two streets.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that's a
And it's
good-
gonna help alleviate, or would it help alleviate those budget items that we were planning for in the next fiscal years?
From my perspective, we're playing catch-up
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, okay.
You know, it's, last year, we paused everything, capital-wise, with the exception of the fire department, and the police department vehicles. With those two, with the exception of those two things, everything else was paused. And some, I know, Bobby, the technicalities of it, but there are some other funds that, you know, some smaller, less material amounts were spent. So for me, it's that we're playing catch-up on our street resurfacing. This plan would be, you know, designed to catch us up there. But moving forward, we're still gonna have to tackle the remaining, and I have a question for you. The remaining 1 and 2 streets. And so that would be the question is, out of these 80 streets, what percentage of our 1 and 2 streets would be, you know, would we knock off?
I can
And what
ask,
we have remaining?
I can get that number.
Yeah,
for
that
you.
would be important information
Okay.
for us to budget in future fiscal years. Is, okay, hey, now maybe we're taking care of X percentage of our 1 and 2 streets. We think our goal originally was to take care of 100% of the 1 and 2 streets within 4 years. So we allocated 3.7, 1.25, and then now we'll come back with 4 and see where we, you know, by now, I think we should be somewhere in the 40 to 50% range, but that's just kind of, you know, back a napkin.
I can get that number.
That'd be interesting to know.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're on the right point there, is how we hacking away at those future capital items that we see, that we've laid out ahead of us.
Well, you mean, the 3, 4, and 5 streets will become 1 and 2
One,
streets.
correct.
Eventually,
In a
yeah.
couple of years, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a question for contract in that, one of the things I'm concerned about is future issues when it comes to paving is, what kind of guarantees do we have? Because sometimes it seems belaboring for the city that we'll pave a street, it looks good, looks wonderful, and then 3 months later, we got potholes, we got problems. Who's responsible for that from a contractual standpoint?
Okay.
Once because we're investing a lot in this, and what I'd like to see, and I appreciate this administration, this council being committed to the citizens with this, but I also want to see it be beneficial to us in that we're not having to come back $500,000, $250,000, 300,000 every other year because we're having some issues with it. What kind of guarantees and with workmanship, things of that nature, do we receive on that end?
Typically, what I've seen in paving contracts, it's a 1-year warranty. Performance and maintenance. Now, it then becomes prudent upon the community or wherever the work is being done to enforce that. So you can have it in there, but if you don't enforce it, it's no benefit. And I've had a number of conversations with staff where streets are starting to look a little shaky after 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. That, at that point in time, is when you need to get a hold of the contractor, because he has the bonds posted. And that list that I will generate and give out, it will be based on work being done in every ward, not necessarily the same amount. We didn't go through and appropriate the same amount to each one, but they will be identified, and there'll be a cost associated on that list showing you how much is being done in each ward.
Yeah.
There's a significant number of dead-end streets that we're doing. Typically, I like to shy away from dead-end streets because they really don't carry a lot of traffic. But the problem we have is that if you've got a major thoroughfare with dead ends off of it, you don't want to mobilize a second time in a future year to come in and do 300-foot streets when you're doing the main drag. Mobilization is not a cheap cost to get them to move into town and move from point A to point B to point C. So what we've tried to do is keep the dead-end roads where we're doing major arterial and collector streets, so that we can get the work done and get a neighborhood done versus cherry picking, do this one, do this one, do this one. Because I know right away, if I don't do an area, the first call's coming in, how come you did theirs and why didn't you do mine?
Any Any other questions for Mr. Wolf? Thank you for your time this
Oh,
morning.
not a problem.
Appreciate it. And
Thank
if you
you.
could get us that information, be
I'll
helpful.
go back right now and get the numbers.
We'll move on to item B. We talked about this at our last meeting, and if you've got somebody that you know that you'd like to recommend to serve on one of these subcommittees, or if you yourself would like to recommend, I've talked to some of you about that. I've been reaching out to some engineers that I know on the infrastructure committee. I've talked to Mr. Arnold, and I believe Ms. Stone will participate in the healthcare look. But what I'd like to do is work and gather some names over the next couple of months, and maybe have something in August where we can start moving into that subcommittee structure.
Stephen Jett for healthcare.
Okay.
Who did you say, Mayor?
Stephen Jett.
Okay. And y'all can email, text me, phone me about that if you see somebody that may be applicable to that. And for those of you that weren't able to attend the last time, what we'd like to do is these are some larger cost segments that we have. Start looking at those and putting some plans together. One, on how we can tackle some of our healthcare costs and keep that quality high for our employees, but also if there's some opportunities for savings, identify those. On the infrastructure side, much like what we've talked about, how are we planning, how are we executing, how are we tracking this stuff? When we get into stormwater, it's a totally different ballgame. You can't see it, so we've got some hires that are going to look at going through and analyzing our stormwater, starting with some large diameter pipes. But we need to develop, much like they've developed with the streets, a scaled approach to say, okay, these are the areas we need to focus on before they fail. Because when you get into a failure mode, Mr. Wolf could have told you, I mean, that's when it gets pretty pricey. If we can get there before it does, there's some options that we've got to shore up some of our infrastructure to get us another 20, 30 years rather than replacing something. And so that committee would be looking at that. Any questions on those? But if you got a recommendation, please let me know. We'll move on to item C, purchasing recommendations and the action plan update from Ms. McKinney.
All right, good morning.
Good
Thank
morning.
you. In regards to our recommendations that we discussed previously in the meeting, I have held several meetings with Purchasing Director Susan White, subsequent meetings with her new employee, as well as a revenue designee to come in and discuss any obstacles or best practices in regards to the changes. We scheduled a department head meeting that was held on yesterday here with all the department heads in the city to kind of prep them for the changes that are forthcoming and to hear from them firsthand any concerns or questions that they had. We still have some kinks to work out. We were hopeful that we would have the plan submitted as requested by July 1. But we have a lot of questions and some fine tuning that we need to do, in the next coming weeks. We're working actively to have a smooth plan to roll out without disruption for the department heads so that they can continue to do business as scheduled. So that's where we are. We're actively working on that, and we should have something to present next month, more in stone,
Okay.
once we continue to meet.
Any questions in regards to those recommendations? These come out of the comptroller's report, Mr. Crone's report. These are some action steps that we've taken to remedy and mitigate some of the issues that we had in those two reports. So, Ms. McKinney, I appreciate your work on that.
Thank you.
If there are no questions, we'll move on and talk a little bit about your audit planning.
Sure.
And how that's going for this year.
Sure. So, entering into the new fiscal year, we have a lot of variables going on, but I did create a fluid plan for the first period, for the first 3 months of the new fiscal year. So in July, you'll see auditing to continue working with purchasing and get that plan rolled out. And any other various department policy reviews. I have several departments that I'm working on with smaller issues just to get resolved. In August, because the new waste management is effective July 1, in August, we're gonna start looking into their operations and just make sure that they're adhering to the contract right off the bat. So in August, we'll start working with the
August
depart-
1 is when that takes.
August 1, okay, I'm sorry. We'll edit that list there. We'll start reviewing with them in September, just to make sure that they have, that they're adhering to the contract and that we're on top of any issues or obstacles. So in August, I'm gonna just put September's, review in August. We're just gonna start in alphabetical order for the first period, and I'm gonna spend some time with the Animal Care and Adoption Center, just reviewing their processes and seeing if they need any assistance or support, with their operations and policies there. And also, all of these months include, unscheduled corrective actions. We have several things that we know will probably need some review in the months to come, and we'll be available to help, as well as any department heads that need assistance. They always call me, and we set up meetings and just handle, situations as they occur daily.
Okay.
So,
Waste management, one of the things that's come out of some of the talks that we've been having regarding trash, bulky waste, is hand pile, the definition of hand pile, and just confirming that waste management is picking up those hand piles. That's one issue that I continue to see in my district, and I know others have seen that as well, is that, those are the piles that maybe it's a small pile of brush or a single bag of leaves or something. They're obligated to pick those up per the contract, per the existing contract and the future contract.
3 by 5, yep.
Yep, a 3 foot by 5 foot by 3
Okay.
foot, volume. What I've seen happening there and what we need to, come to see eye to eye with Waste Management on is that they're picking those up as the weeks go by. If they miss that on a pickup day, by the next week, that can exceed that size very quickly. And then it becomes our responsibility to pick it up. So we need to hold them accountable on picking up those piles.
And the contract does say, I think it's part of the education piece, those hand piles come August 1 will have to be next to the trash can. And so
Okay,
they can't be on the other side of the yard, they have to be next to the trash can.
gotcha.
okay. And we're educating
Mhm.
the public
Yeah,
on that too.
yeah.
Mr. Arnold, I don't have it on here, but would you mind providing us just a quick update on where we are in our correspondence with our new external auditor? And I should have put that on there, excuse me for that. And-
Sure, happy to. So you'll recall, we have a new audit firm, Malden and Jenkins. They have offices basically in Atlanta and in Chattanooga, a very experienced firm. So we're engaged with them now, pretty much where we would be with our audit firm in the past. They're gonna be on site here, July the 6th and 7th, or 7th and 8th, 2 of those days. We're gonna be doing inventory counts June 29th and 30th. I understand they're gonna have somebody here to observe the inventory counts. Kind of running parallel with Tawanica's report. As you would expect, they're not familiar. This will be their first year to audit the city of Jackson, so they have requested lots of information, lots of questionnaires, lots of policies and procedures. So we're in the process of providing them that information as well. There are some, what I would refer to as kind of nothing abnormal, but kind of normal transitional issues from one fiscal year to the next. Some of these issues, we would be engaged with our previous audit firm if they were in fact coming back. You know, so I've sort of got that list, right, prepared, and we're engaged with them as well on that. So that's pretty much where we are. The way things work normally is, we have until the end of August, to provide them our pre-audit final trial balance numbers. So that's kind of the, schedule that we will remain. The main reason that's why that's kind of a governmental thing. We've talked about this modified accrual basis that governmental agencies operate under. It's kind of a 60-day window, so that's kind of the reason you hold things open until, you know, until the end of August. And I guess internally, we are established with them. They have some pretty cool software that's frankly, hopefully going to be an asset for us we've not had access to in the past in terms of communicating, providing information with them. So we're lined up on that. So things are where I think we would hope that they would be. I'm frankly happy to have the budget behind us now, so we can now focus on getting our numbers where we would like for them to be pre-audit, you know, and turn those over. And you know, the audit process will be more demanding. I've kind of prepared our staff internally for this. There's no question about that. It will be more time-consuming and demanding this year than it has been in the past. But it'll be a good thing, and it's a good opportunity, Tuanica's internal work and kind of their interest in our policies. You know, that work can kind of piggyback on top of each other. So I think we're on target, I guess.
Well, thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. No problem.
Any other business today?
Mr. Chair, you may want to correct me if I speak wrong, but I believe this is probably my last meeting.
Yes, sir.
And so I appreciate the mayor selecting me. I hope in the 2 years, there was some input from me, and I appreciate every single hour, minute, days, weeks, months that this group has put in to help the citizens of Jackson, Tennessee. I'm honored to have served, and who knows what the future will lead. So thank y'all for letting me be on here.
Thank you, Doug. We really appreciate your input and you serving as our unofficial parliamentarian during my first year here and keeping me squared up. I really appreciate that. But thank you again for your time that you've put into this, and we appreciate your service.
Thank y'all all.
With that being said, we'll adjourn. Thank you, everybody.